How are we doing today, guys? Let's start off again. I know I haven't made a video in a while, but today I'm going to be going over 5 heavy metal albums that I really enjoy. If you guys didn't know, I'm a massive metalhead. I listen to death metal, black metal, power metal, like every genre of metal. I love it all. I have a bit of a CD collection that I've been building up over the last couple of years of some of my favorite albums. I'm trying to collect more CDs. They can be a bit on the pricey side, but I just love having the physical copy and being able to open up the jewel case and see my favorite artists, just like what they have to say and everything. It's super cool. I'm gonna start with some bigger bands for now. If I decide to do more of these, then I'll do some of the more smaller bands that I have that maybe you guys have never heard of. But for now, I'm just gonna go with some albums from some bigger bands that haven't been as recognized as some of the more popular albums, and just give them some recognition and give my thoughts on them. So let me go ahead and start with this one. So this is Morningrise by Opeth. Let's see, you guys see it? Yeah. Um, Hold it up here. This is an absolutely killer album. I know a lot of people know Opeth for Blackwater Park, Ghost Reveries, Still Life, or some of their newer stuff like In Caught Venom and Sorceress and Pale Communion. And I love their new stuff and I love their old stuff. But if you listen to their early stuff, it's actually quite good. And I know a lot of people are critical of Morning Rise, particularly. I know the production quality isn't the best, and some of the songs can be a bit slow and whatnot. But I recently purchased this album probably less than half a year ago, and I've been listening to it a lot. And as someone who's experienced most of Opeth's catalog, I have to say that I'm very impressed by this album, and I think it gets a little bit too much hate for what it is. The songs on here are very long. I mean, Black Rose Immortal is 20 minutes long. That's crazy. But it's kind of like typical Opeth fashion. I understand why people don't like it. I mean, it's definitely not for everyone. It's very heavy compared to some of their other stuff. But it's a great album overall, and I think people should give it a chance because I know I'm more of a metal elitist, and when you go to the metal archives, it's like one of the lowest reviewed Opeth albums, and I was surprised by that because I enjoyed it when I purchased it, and yeah, I mean, I just think it's a great album. And if you're a fan of Opeth and you've listened to some of their more popular stuff, and you're into the longer songs and the very progressive with the classical Ackerfeld old growling vocals that he used to do, this is gonna be you're gonna love this album. It's very good. So then next up is gonna be one of my favorite albums of all time, Insomnium Winter's Gate. I purchased this album a while ago. It was one of my first CDs I bought because I fell in love with this album from the first time I heard it. The reason I love this album so much is because there's a YouTuber named Cover Killer Nation. For those of you who are in the metal community, you'll probably know who he is, and he actually retired from YouTube at the end of 2019. But he was very influential in me learning about metal because I started off with bands when I was in like the seventh grade, like Iron Maiden, Avenged Sevenfold, Metallica, that sort of thing. And it kind of just developed into heavier and heavier stuff. And I found I got to a place where going on to Spotify and Apple Music I wasn't able to find the type of music I was looking for. So by finding these underground YouTubers like Cover Killer Nation and Angry Metal Guy, the website, I was able to experience more music than I had ever thought. And one of those albums was Winter's Gate by Insomnium. And it's one track that's 40 minutes long, and my girlfriend always gives me shit for playing it because she thinks it's just way too long. But this album is super good. I mean, it feels like you're in Norway or you're in Sweden or you're in one of those Scandinavian countries just trekking through the winter, and the guitars are so melodic and some of the riffs are crazy, and the vocals are great, the transitions are amazing. The parts where they slow down the song too and they use acoustic guitars, it's just a great album. And if you're familiar with some of Insomnium's other work, like Above the Weeping World, that's a great album as well. But this album is very experimental, and it's different from that album in the sense that it's not just going to be back to back of these, great songs by Insomnium, but it's not going to be back to back, song after song. This is 40 minutes of emotion. It's 40 minutes of fast pace, then slow pace, and moments of harmony and moments of clean vocals and screamed vocals, and it's just an excellent album. And like I was saying, Cover Killer Nation actually turned me on to this album because he did his 2016 top 50 albums list, and Around 2015 is when I really started getting into like underground metal. Like I remember I listened to like Baroness's Purple, and I started getting into a little bit more underground stuff. And I found Insomnium Winter's Gate in 2016 when he made that end of the year list, and I've loved it ever since. I mean, it's just an excellent album, and I personally love long tracks, as you can see. I like tracks that build you up and take you, on an emotional ride. I like slow tracks as well. Like I have a Vader record over there, the Polish death metal band, and a lot of their songs can be really fast paced. And I have the Terrorizer World Downfall album as well, and those are great albums. But I mean, for me, long songs are just able to build up emotion and build up so much character and take you on a ride. These fast guitar riffs, and repetition is not always people's forte, but for me, repetition adds to music, in my opinion. The next album I'll go over is another one that Cover Killer Nation turned me on to, and this is Terminal Redux by Vektor. And I find it a bit hypocritical that people don't want to support Vektor anymore because of the allegations put against David DeSanto. And I mean, they're terrible allegations, but I mean, the black metal scene has been filled with that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously not domestic abuse, but church burnings and murders, and that all that stuff happened, and we still listen to the music because we were able to separate the music from the artist. And I feel like with Terminal Redux, that's kind of what I've done, because I mean, no one's condoning what David DeSanto did, but at the end of the day, it's a great album, whether he did it or not. And Terminal Redux is an amazing album. I mean, I've, as you can see, this disc is super scratched up, and it's only 5 years old. I mean, it's just a super scratched up disc because I listen to it all the time. It's always in my car. It's basically a sci-fi epic, so it takes thrash metal, but it has these super screechy and like distorted vocals. It's kind of hard to explain, but I played it for my girlfriend's mom, and she was like, I hate this guy's voice, but I think it sounds sick. And Terminal Redux basically follows the protagonist of the album. It's a sci-fi concept album, and the protagonist of the album is essentially he's trying to get back at the planet. He got basically sent to some sort of prison in outer space, and he's trying to get back at the planet he's living on. So he's isolated in space, and he starts spying on everyone and like hacking into their computers and stuff, and he ends up creating this perfect utopia around the planet. But the perfect utopia ends up just completely collapsing after he takes over the world. So on the songs Surrepticon and Psychotropia, that's like when he's actually taking over the world. And the beginning where it's Singus Terminal and LCD, that's when he's brainwashing them and that sort of thing. And by Pillars of Sand, it's like you get this utopia, but then collapse happens, and it's this slow-paced song. It's the only slow-paced song on the album, and it's great because the first 8 tracks are just pure thrash, like insane riffs. There's a video of Vektor playing this album live in Greece in 2016, I believe. I'd recommend you check it out. It's some of the riffs on these songs, like Charging the Void at the intro, where it's like banamp, 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 and like it's crazy, man. This album is super, super good. I'd say the standout tracks: Charging the Void, Recharging the Void, Surrepticon, Pillars of Sand, LCD. I mean, all the songs are really good, but if you're into thrash metal or concept albums at all, this is definitely one to check out. It's great. It's great stuff. So the next one, Enslaved with E, and this album is funny because I recently got into Enslaved, pretty hardcore. I had heard their stuff before. I remember when E came out, I listened to it in 2017, but I had never been like a hardcore Enslaved fan. I'd listened to like Below the Lights, E, and I think that's all I listened to up until like a year ago or 2 years ago. And I started at the record store. I go to my local record store. I picked up a few of their albums. I believe I picked up In Times, this one, and RIITIR, or whatever that one is called. And they just have this really, really, really interesting sound because it's black metal, but they have clean vocals in there as well. And there's definitely a very heavy Scandinavian influence. And it's just really it's very technically sound music, very atmospheric. You almost feel your beard growing as you listen to the music. I mean, it's really, really good stuff. But for some reason, this album came out in 2017, and it's excellent. I mean, it is so good. And I like I've said, I've listened to some of their other stuff, like Below the Lights and the other albums that I own. And for some reason, I always find myself going back to E. E is just, it's excellent. I mean, it is such a good album. The the black metal is kind of toned down in this a little bit. It feels more Viking than any of the other albums I've listened to, but that's not a problem. I mean, it works so well on this album, and I'd highly recommend it to fans of Enslaved. Or if you've never really been into black metal before, this might be a good stepping stone into getting into the genre, because it's definitely a little lighter, and it's a bit more experimental than their other stuff, and it has elements of other genres as well. So this is a great album. Sacred Horse is a really good song. It's just a really good album. I'd highly recommend checking it out. And then last, it's gonna be the album Graveward by Sigh. Sigh is, I believe they're a pretty popular band. This is a band I completely found on my own. I listened to some more avant-garde bands like Maudlin of the Well, Unexpect. I'm trying to think more off the top of my head, but yeah, I like a lot of avant-garde music. I think it's interesting to see what an artist's creativity can bring, and as far as music. And with metal, I mean, the boundaries are limitless. You can do whatever you want in metal. You know, there's no such thing as too heavy in metal. So you can just kind of, whatever anger or sadness you're feeling, you can translate that into music. And I feel like that's exactly what Psy do on not only this record, but some of their other ones as well. Insomnophobia is actually the first CD I heard from them. And the intro song is just so like experimental and weird. It kind of feels like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just when the screaming comes, you're just so caught off guard, because the guitar feels almost like just traditional heavy metal guitar. And it has elements of like maybe blues to it as well. But the singing catches you off guard, and it's very heavy, but it's very experimental and avant-garde at the same time. And then after listening to Insomnophobia, I went back and listened to some of their other stuff, and Graveward, I think, might even be better than that album, because this album I listen to pretty often as well. This album has a lot more progression in it as well. This album is a little more progressive than Insomnophobia, in my opinion. Great riffing. I like the use of clean vocals on this album as well. This album has a good amount of clean vocals. Not as much switching between the female and male vocals as Insomnophobia did, but nevertheless, it's an excellent album, and I'd highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of avant-garde music at all. It's just very epic, and the songs aren't too long, but each song has its own character. I mean, you can take any song off this album, and it would do just fine on its own, and I think it's a really excellent album. So yeah, those are the 5 albums I'm going to go ahead and choose. Like I said, I mean, if you're, involved in metal at all, the underground, not even underground, but just metal in general, I mean, you've probably heard of Opeth. Insomnium's pretty big, Vektor, Enslaved. I mean, they're pretty big bands. So in the future, I might take some of the more underground records that I own and show them off. But yeah, I mean, these are really excellent albums, and I feel like they're 5 albums from popular bands that don't get enough recognition. Specifically, Morningrise by Opeth, I feel like is kind of like a dark horse in the Opeth catalog. But Opeth is just such an excellent band. I mean, I'm looking at my Blackwater Park CD. I mean, it's just such a good CD. And yeah, Winter's Gate is great. They're all great albums, and I'd highly recommend listening to them. If you're not a fan of metal, and you've never listened to metal before, these are all pretty good stepping stones into the genre. I'd say aside from probably Vektor, Terminal Redux, because this album is pretty. The vocals can be hard to get into if you've never been accustomed to screaming vocals before. This album might be a little crazy as well, but definitely Morningrise by Opeth. Just any Opeth in general is really good stepping stone into metal, because it has acoustic guitars and clean vocals, as well as the death metal screams and the heavy riffs. So I feel like that's a good stepping point. Specifically Enslaved, if you listen to this album, E, I think this is a good stepping stone into the world of black metal. And if you just like atmosphere at all or anything like that, I think Insomnium Winter's Gate, it has elements of almost every musical genre to please all music fans. And yeah, I mean, I just love discussing music I love. So yeah, that's the video for now. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and comment on this video. I like doing comic book reviews as well. My 3 biggest passions are definitely comic books, video games, and heavy metal music. I mean, those are the 3 things I love the most. It's what I do with most of my free time. And I love making videos. I mean, I just love talking about metal because not many people I know listen to metal. The ones that do listen to, like, Metallica, which is good, and Iron Maiden and Slayer and bands like that, which is awesome. But I mean, I'd love to find some people in my community who listen to, some black metal and some death metal and be able to discuss the different albums I've listened to. So being able to, vent that out to a camera is always super nice. But anyway, thanks a bunch. Huge shout out to Cover Killer Nation. He really helped me develop into the metalhead I am today. And thanks for watching.